Good morning. I'm Harley Schleinger from the LaRouche Organization with your daily video update for July 25th, 2025. We're at a moment where the battle between two paradigms has become increasingly sharpened, and it escalated yesterday with some leading developments that are important to get into to understand where we're headed and why it's necessary for you to join us to make sure the new paradigm of a new security and development architecture wins out over the old paradigm of permanent warfare and central bank dictatorship. On the pro-war side, we saw the people committed to defending the existing order escalating their fight on two fronts. One, yesterday the Knesset, the Israeli parliament, voted for annexation of the West Bank. Now, this is the so-called occupied territory, which is a major portion of what would be a Palestinian state. And this is coming in the context of an escalating attack on Palestinians who live on the West Bank that escalated in January 2025. So this was a very almost unanimous vote in the Knesset to extend the occupation and actually eliminate the possibility of a Palestinian state. Secondly, the German foreign minister, Johann Vadaful, said that Ukraine will be given a capability to launch missile strikes inside Russia. Now, he didn't specify the Taurus missile, which is what Merz, the chancellor, has promised on a couple of occasions. But this is a dangerous escalation, as it will, the Russians have said, it will make Germany a party to the war. So this is an extremely dangerous move. Merz is quite incompetent, quite under the influence of the existing Anglo-American military-industrial complex. And this is part of the strategy of the European three, so-called, the Britain, France, and Germany. Now, on the other side, you have moves against war, which are fairly decisive. One, Macron, who can't fully be relied on, issued a statement yesterday saying that France will recognize the Palestinian state as an independent state at the September UN General Assembly meeting. Now, before that, July 28th and 29th, there'll be a conference on a two-state solution. The question is, what will the U.S. do if Macron goes ahead with this? Secondly, a court in Brussels, Belgium, and remember, Brussels is the center of NATO and the European Union, ruled that the Belgian government is violating its obligations under the Genocide Convention rules if it allows military shipments to Israel to go through its ports. This could be a very important precedent. We'll see where it goes. But it indicates the disunity in the European Union toward the war policy. And then we're also seeing protests against Zelensky break out in Ukraine. We don't know where this is going yet, but the Ukraine situation is an increasing disaster for the West. There are talks of a new series of meetings between Russia and Ukraine. The U.S. should use its influence to put enormous pressure on Ukraine to reach the agreements for a new security architecture in Europe that Putin had been organizing for since 2008. And then finally, you have the Gabbard investigation. Now, as we've been reporting, this is crucial because it could reestablish the whole principle of accountability. Who is it in the West that's committed to war? And what have they done in the period since literally 1990 to 92 to move NATO eastward and to threaten the security of Russia? And this is what Putin raised initially before the special military operation, that Russia was fearful that its security was threatened by the expansion of NATO, and especially NATO weapons in the hands of Ukrainian war hawks and neo-Nazis. Now, the Gabbard investigation is getting at the question of what was behind Russiagate, the attempt to prevent Trump in his first term from establishing better relations with Russia, in fact, normalization of relations, by presenting completely fabricated story that Putin was responsible for his election victory, not the American people. Now, the investigation from Gabbard is releasing documents which show that the intelligence community, which under Obama and then in the first Trump term and then again under Biden, insisted that Russia was guilty of meddling in U.S. elections, and that this was the consensus of the intelligence community. The documents being declassified by Tulsi Gabbard, the Director of National Intelligence, show that this is false, that there was not consensus, that there was mild or weak agreement to the assessment of Russian intervention. And this is a crucial point because it shows that the Obama administration, especially Brennan and Clapper, lied to prevent Trump from moving toward a normalization of relations with Russia. And why did they do that? Because they were committed after the Maidan coup in 2014, which brought a so-called pro-Western regime into power in Ukraine, which was really a Nazi regime, an ultra-right nationalist regime. That was the intent, to put pressure on Russia, and as the U.S. Defense Secretary said, to weaken Russia, or as many of the think tanks that were involved said, to break apart Russia to grab its raw material resources. So this was the true story behind Russiagate. It's coming out now, and I'm going to be attaching a link to a new article from the Executive Intelligence Review, which goes through exactly what's been produced by the Gabbard revelations so far. I'll also attach an article that I wrote in June 2018, which goes to the heart of where the next step is, the so-called elephant in the room when it comes to Russiagate, which is that it was not Obama that initiated it. Obama was a dutiful servant of the British intelligence, but that the Russiagate initiative came from the British. And in the article that I wrote, I point to the role of Robert Hannigan of the GCHQ, the British equivalent of the NSA, who in the summer of 2015 was putting out the story of detecting Russian cyber warfare on the US election. It wasn't until June of 2016 that he brought this to the United States to the attention of Brennan, the CIA director, who used it to begin the whole story, the fake story of Russiagate, working through networks in the FBI with Comey, the National Security Agency of Clapper. And what we also find is the omnipresence of the former MI6 chief, Sir Richard Dearloffe, in coordinating the story of so-called Russian intervention. And what you find is that Dearloffe, by the way, was the person who brought the lie of Iraqi weapons of mass destruction to the Bush administration that was behind the launching of the war against Iraq in 2003. But Dearloffe was one of the central figures in organizing the whole British side of Russiagate, working with people like Stefan Halper, Joseph Mifsud. These were people who were involved in promoting the line that there was evidence of Russian involvement in putting Trump into the presidency. And this included one of Dearloffe's top operatives at MI6, former operatives, Christopher Steele, who wrote the discredited dossier which was used for the escalation of the intelligence services against Trump and against Putin. Now, in this case, we see Hannigan working together with Dearloffe, and that's still the case. Hannigan is an operative from the Tony Blair networks. He is a cybersecurity expert. He's the person who set up the UK National Cybersecurity Agency while he was head of GCHQ, and he's continued that in his post-government career, creating cybersecurity firms that are working for censorship and control of information at the European Union. Dearloffe, same thing. Dearloffe continues to be a leading war hawk pushing for escalation of war against Iran, and both of them work in collaboration with RUSI, the Russian Uniform Service Intelligence. RUSI is the military think tank of the oldest military think tank in Britain, and also with Chatham House. So this network is being exposed. This is the network that's being defended by the war hawks in both parties in the United States, who are attacking Gabbard and the work that she's doing. So I've appended these two articles to give you the inside view of what Russiagate was about, and to use that to demand accountability for the criminal network inside the U.S. government and U.S. political parties, which is committed to continuing war and central bank rule. This is the fight that's going on right now. I also have the link to the International Peace Coalition meeting for today, which will take up these questions. This is a moment of complete potential transformation. And I'm calling on all of you, and many of you already know this, take these documents and get them out. Help us make sure that the attempt to discredit Gabbard not only fails, but that accountability is restored. If we don't have an accountable government in the United States, the world heads toward a catastrophe, driven by the likes of Hannigan, Dearlove, Keir Starmer, and that whole crew. So take the opportunity now, join us, do your part, and let's make sure that the war hawks are put on the